Right. So, of course, this is about the certification oriented focus towards the level 1 part.
Okay.
But before we are getting into the level 1 and all, first of all, there are some content, right? What is that I'm going to cover, especially as far as the TOGAF training itself is concerned? Because certification, either it can be level 1 or level 2 or certification oriented. But when we are applying for certification for TOGAF, or when we are trying to address the certifications, either it can be 1 or 2, it's all based on the scenario, because scenario based learning is what something which is essentially important, which is majorly required when we are applying for TOGAF part. Because as we know, like TOGAF is an enterprise architecture framework. So that what I'm going to explain today, right? So first of all, let us start with the content, right? What is that I'm going to cover in today's session, right? So in today's session and coming days, right? So what is that are we going to discuss about that? And slowly we'll start with the basics of TOGAF. From there onwards, we will be moving on to the next level, ADM part of that. Is it clear, Akhil? Understood?
Right.
Okay, I'm going to start, and I'm thinking I'm considering this training as a layman perspective. Do remember, okay?
Yes, yes,
So if
yes,
there is
yes.
any basic fundamentals, if there is any something of confusion and all, everything can be rectified because of it. Clear, Akhil? Understood?
Right.
Right. So we're going to start from the basics, wherein this is what generally the content. Of course, there is some changes which I require to make. So because earlier we discussed about 1 and 2, now our focus is morely on the level 1. So this is where generally the major part are we going to cover about the introduction and all. At the same time, we must be knowing about the basic core concepts of TOGAF, because TOGAF is one of architectural enterprise architecture framework widely used in the organizations. You know that. I don't need to give
Right.
you an introduction about TOGAF, but let me give you an overview about that. Because normally there are two major prominent frameworks we use in the industry. One is Jackman framework, second is TOGAF. These are the two major frameworks. Jackman framework we are using for a very long time. It is not now. We were using for almost, I can say more than 17, 18 years, more than that even, right? So Jackman framework is being used. Even, of course, TOGAF, even we are using for a very long time, but implementation of TOGAF especially varies when we are implementing this from IT companies to non-IT, because there is a misconception over TOGAF implementation exclusively useful for IT companies. This is a general misconception. I'm not specifying any individual, but in general, most of the people have a misconception over TOGAF is that TOGAF framework is being used in IT. But to an extent possible, it is true, but not to the full extent.
Okay.
Because TOGAF framework, whatever are we talking about, normally this specifies you the enterprise architecture of any organization. Now, if you want to understand about enterprise architecture, first of all, there are 4 core elements are there in enterprise architecture. Let me write down here. So the core elements means if you want to discuss about EA, which stands for enterprise architecture, there are 4 core architectures will be there. The first one about the business architecture part.
Right.
Second, we call it as application architecture. Third, we call it as systems architecture. Last one, we call it as data architecture, right? So these are the 4 different architectures which will be part of enterprise architecture, because there are 2 architectures we need to understand. One is enterprise architecture, second is a solution architecture. Let me give you a high level view. Enterprise architecture will majorly understand about the whole enterprise, irrespective of the organization I'm talking about. Because either it can be a financial institution, or it can be an insurance company or healthcare or retailing, right? So any industry we are talking about. So enterprise architecture majorly deals with four core architectures: business architecture, second is an application architecture, followed by the systems architecture and data architecture. But whereas when it comes to the solution architecture is concerned, solution architecture majorly confined towards the kind of solution, what is that are you going to provide for a particular business problem. Let me give you a scenario here. For example, I'll give you an example to you so that you'll be understood well. For example, there is a financial institution or a bank. They are planning us to develop some core banking application. So core banking is a backend. I don't say it's a backend application. Core banking is a niche application which is used for the backend operations. Because normally, if you take any bank or an institution, there will be of three layers. One is about front end layer, middle layer, and back end layer. Back end operations. Front end. At the same time, middle layer. Front end means customer services, everything comes under front end system. Middle layer means whatever the rules and regulations, right? So regulatory standards, policies, and procedures comes under the middle part. Back end, databases, decisions, and all everything will be taken on. Now, an organization, a financial institution, or a bank planning to develop a core banking application, or assume that there was an existing core banking application which they wants to upgrade this to the next level. This is the scenario. Now, do remember, providing a solution for the existing business problem, what they have identified by understanding the business scenario is utmost important. Who usually do that? This is where generally the role of a business analyst come into picture. You know that, right? So being into role of a business analyst people, what usually business analyst people, because I'm coming to enterprise architecture from there, okay? So that you will be understood well. Business analysts try to understand the business situation and scenarios, the importance, intensity, etc. At the same time, business analyst group of people will come up with some business solution that has to be implemented in reality. That's where we call it as technical solution, we call it as. If they wants to implement a technical solution, what is that we require? They should understand the non-functional requirement also, because there are two major things. One is functional aspect, second is a non-functional aspect. Functional aspects means what are the features and functionalities you want to develop for core banking application. When it comes to non-functional part is concerned, non-functionality majorly focusing on performance, scalability, load balancing, right? So this is all comes under the non-functional requirements, right? So these are the two major requirements will be there. Now, usually there will be a role of architects, usually I can say, right? So whoever are in the role of architecture, these architecture roles will be of different roles. You can see in the industry we have majorly in the field of IT, right? Not in non-IT, you have some slight variation, but whereas in IT you can see more evident. So there will be different roles, right? So you may see a role. Some people are playing a role as business architects. Some people may be solution architects and all. Somebody are cloud architects, data architects, right? This is how generally it was categorized. So any solution we want to develop, there are two architectures has to be identified. One is EA, second is SA. EA stands for enterprise architecture, SA stands for solution architecture.
Right.
Honestly speaking, there is no official connect. I mean to say there is no official connect with EA to SA. No official connect. EA completely focusing on the enterprise of a particular organization. If you take a bank or a financial institution, when we talk about enterprise architecture, when we try to understand enterprise architecture, the whole enterprise you have to understand, the whole system, ecosystem of a particular business organization, not unit. Okay, complete business organization you need to understand. If you want to understand the whole ecosystem of an organization, this is where generally we call it as business architecture come into picture. Point number one. So what is business architecture? Business architecture majorly focuses on the goal and vision of the company, because whichever the organization you are providing a solution, end of the day, we must able in a position to understand the goal and vision as well as the mission, because any organization have multiple things. Because any organization they have a mission statement. So prior to the mission statement, they have a vision, right? Company will have a vision, mission statement. At the same time, they have some objectives. Either it can be a long-term or short-term objectives. Objectives or goals will be there. If they want to implement those objectives, they require some strategies to be implemented. To implement the strategies, they require some tactics, right? This is the whole understanding over the organization. Any organization you can take. So if we try to understand about enterprise architecture on a high level note, it's always important for us to understand the business architecture part initially to begin with.
Right.
Business architecture majorly focusing on business goals and objectives, etc. Point number one. Next, business architecture will also be focused more on the services which organization is going to be provided. And just give me a minute. I'll share you that screen so that you will be understood well. Can you see the screen now, Akhil? Akhil, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see your screen. It's D volume.
You can see my screen, right?
Yes, B8 folder.
Yeah. Right. So this is where generally the it's not architectural TOGAF point of view. I'll tell you later.
Okay.
Just give me a minute. I'll show you what are all comes under business architecture, because if you want to define any enterprise level understanding, enterprise architecture, if you try to understand about the enterprise architecture, it's always important for us to understand the business architecture, right? So this is where generally the business architecture majorly focuses on. So what is business architecture? Business architecture is combination of multiple things. What are all the things are there in business architecture? First, we must be knowing about what are the goal, vision, and mission of the organization. This is what something which we have to be known with, right? So vision, strategies, right? So at the same time, tactics, all these things we have to be known with. Point number one, any organization. Let us take an example called a financial institution or a bank. You are going to develop a core banking solution for them. It's not only about the solution you are going to develop for the present scenario, but you should also think this from the end goal perspective, because a customer is investing some X amount of money for a particular solution doesn't mean not for the present problem what they are facing. Even they may be expecting you to provide a solution by considering the future needs also. This future needs you will be identified as we are people who are studying about enterprise architecture. We will be studying when we are trying to understand about vision, strategies, and tactics. Point number one. Point number two. Being into enterprise architecture, when we study about the BA, business architecture part, we must be knowing about the policies, rules, and regulations, because every organization is confined with some rules and regulations, policies, procedures, and all. These rules, regulations, policies, and procedures may be varied from country to country. Maybe, for example, country to country, even though it's a financial institution or a bank, area of operation, from where area of operation are happening, based on that, whatever the rules and regulations, policies and procedures and all, everything will be varied. You know that, right? So When we try to understand business architecture, it's not only about the vision, strategies, and tactics. We should be able in a position to understand policies, rules, and regulations also. This is point number 2. Next, we must be knowing about the customers, partners, and competitors. This is also one of the core and important element one should understand. Customer, partners, and competitors. Because we are providing a solution for a customer problem. Perception is important end of the day, right? What kind of perception we have to develop? We have to develop a perception in such a way who are their competitors, because end of the day organization wants to be ahead with the competitor. The kind of services they are providing for their customers, everything must be in that level. Okay, so it's always important for us to understand about who are their customers, who are their partners, who are their competitors. So competitors, again, this varies the size of the organization and the level of services they are providing, because either it can be domestic level or it can be national or international level. So I'm talking about the size of organization. This will vary, Akhil. Okay, this is not something common for any organization. Depends on the services that organization is giving, how big the company is, and what services they are providing and where they are providing. Right. So based on that, we will be doing that. This is even important. Next, we must be knowing about the structure of organization. I can say the hierarchical process, etc., followed by the required information, whatever is needed, etc. All these. Next, we must be knowing about the products and services. Normally, this is where generally industry, I don't use a word called industry or a sector, I can say. Better word to be used is sector. Normally, in across the world, normally there are two sectors. One is manufacturing, second is services. You can see anything. Normally, anyone comes in one category. Either one belongs to manufacturing, and I can second is services. Means you are developing or you are producing a product. Either it can be a software product or it can be a mission, right? It can be a car, it can be a vehicle, it can be a mobile, it can be of anything, right? So it is manufacturing. Second
Right.
is services. Services means either these services are maybe pre and post services. Okay, what are the services? Because all the IT sector are we talking about, which was incepted somewhere in the mid 90s, all belongs to this part, IT only. You know that, right? IT services we are providing, and of course even business process services, right? So all these services we are providing for the customer. But end of the day, you need to have a product, you need to have a manufacturing thing first. Unless there is no manufacturing, there is no services. That was the situation in the beginning. But now these two are interrelated, interconnected, because if you have a manufacturing sector, right? So manufacturing system is depending on services side. So vice versa. Service sector is even depending on the manufacturing side. So it's always important to study about the business architecture from the context of the products and services. What kind of products and services are we going to provide for the customer, right? So what are the different products and services customer is providing to their clients, right? So which industry they belongs to, right? So are they into service industry or manufacturing industry? If they are from manufacturing industry, how big and how big the operations were they're performing for a long time. If it was a service industry, right, which segment they are providing services, and how what type of services they are going to provide, and also you need to understand about the products and services of the organization. That is next level. Next, what are the initiatives and projects they were taken, right? So is there any kind of initiatives in the context of business initiatives, I can say. What are the different business initiatives they are taking? And is there any kind of projects? Nothing but I can tell you from the context of task or an assignment. Okay, project, not in a projects, I'm not talking about in a bigger level. Maybe what are the initiatives, what are the tasks and assignments they have taken. For example, you are going to develop a core banking solution. There must be a reason behind that. There must be a reason why, because core banking application we use for the backend operations of a bank, right? So whole banking operations will be managed using core behind customer expecting you to provide solution for that, right? So this is all something which I am giving you an example from the IT perspective. Remember,
Right.
Akhil. Okay, I'm not saying
Yes.
from the non-IT side. Akhil, you're listening, right? I'm talking about the IT example I'm giving. I'll give you non-IT as well in the coming days. Okay, that's a different thing. Because when we talk about TOGAF as an implementation, TOGAF implementation, enterprise level architectural framework. This is nothing to do with services you belongs to. Either this can be implemented even in the manufacturing sector also. You can use it in the service sector also. Okay, so this is common anyway, end of the day. Which one, TOGAF framework, whatever are we going to use? But before we are getting into the framework of TOGAF and all, we are talking about enterprise architecture. When I am talking about enterprise architecture, in that we are talking about business architecture. The reason I've taken an IT as an example. I hope you understood now.
Right. Right. I completely agree.
Initiatives and sorry.
Yeah, I completely agree. Can you
Okay.
put this file, this image in the chat window or in the WhatsApp, like just for like
You,
my
yeah,
reference?
yeah. I'll forward all these in WhatsApp to you. You no need to worry.
Okay.
This whatever the presentations I have, I'll forward in WhatsApp to you.
Okay. Fine.
Okay. Once the session is done, I'll forward it. Okay. No problem. So that you can review. Okay. You can review those and you can get it prepared for that. Okay. Clear, Akhil?
Right.
Okay. Right. So initiatives and projects. What are the business initiatives I'm talking about? Because business initiatives, to succeed in business initiatives or to run the business initiatives, customer is expecting a solution out of it. So it's always important for us to understand what are the business initiatives or the assignments or the tasks which they have already taken or about to take. Even we need to consider that as well. At the same time, value streaming, right? So value stream mapping, I can say that what are the different value streams they are considering to make their organization more successful? What are the different areas of value stream mapping, value stream areas they have identified, and how to integrate value stream mapping and all. This is also important. That's the reason why if you go for scaled agile framework, because especially now and then we are going for agile model, right? Agile implementation we are doing. Of course, agile implementation we are doing only for the team level. It is different. But when you are going for business unit level or organization level, hope you know there is a framework which is called SAFE, Scaled Agile Framework. I hope you might have known about that, right? Scaled Agile Framework. Scaled Agile
Mhm.
Framework, where you are implementing the agile way of environment in the organization level. Organization level, before organization level, you can do it for a unit level. For example, if you have a manufacturing industry, let's say, for example, you have a manufacturing industry, something relating to electronics, maybe, for example, electronic manufacturing or a mechanical, something like. There are a lot of departments are there, right? So you have HR department, right? So you have finance, right? So you have customer services. There are different departments there. Now, if you want to implement agile in the organization, because scaled agile and as well as TOGAF have some similarities. The reason why I have taken this example to you. Okay, so let's say, for example, we want to implement agile environment in an organization, in their decision making, in their business activities and all, if they want to implement that, for example, if that was the scenario. First of all, normally we don't implement for the whole enterprise. We don't do it. Normally,
Okay.
this is confined maybe majorly for only for project first. We initially start with project, point number one. So once the project next, what we do, we will be trying to implement this in the business unit level. Business unit level means, let's say you have taken a finance department as an example and you try to implement your scale agile practices in context to the decision making or implementation from the finance department point of view. Slowly after finance department, you are going for HR, right? So from their operations, from their customer service. So different departments you are implementing agile framework. This is what generally we call it as scaled agile. So when you try to understand about the scaled agile, there is a similarity. The reason as I've taken value streaming is important because what are the different areas of value streaming models or areas which are to be focused on all that. At the same time, how to map this value streaming is one of the key and important element, and how this can be done by the organization. This is important. So value streaming is also one of the core and important element when we try to understand the business architecture. Next, what are the metrics and measurements to be taken into consideration? This is also one of the core element to be focused. What are the different metrics and measurements? Metrics and measures to evaluate the performance of the project, performance of an activity, performance of an organization. Because organization, when we run, we have to implement multiple metrics and measurements to evaluate the performance of the organization. Performance of the organization not only confined only to the material success. Okay, materialistic success is part of company, organization. But end of the day, team level success is equally important, right? So what are the different metrics are we going to follow, right? So what are the different measurements are we going to take, right? So what are the different parameters are taken by us into consideration to implement all that? This is all we call it as metrics and measurements, right? What are the different metrics and measures to be taken and to be implemented, so that we have to be identified in this regard. Next, when we talk about the decisions and events, what are the different decisions are taken by the organization or about to take by the organization and all, and what are the events they want to perform. So these are the complete aspects we have to consider when we try to understand the business architecture, which is part of EA. When you try to understand about enterprise architecture, first we should understand the business architecture. Point number one. Point number two, application architecture. What is meant by application architecture? Application architecture majorly combines multiple applications for any organization. If you take a financial institution, as I mentioned you, for a bank, there are multiple applications they use, right? So they may be using core banking application for backend operations. They may be using a payroll management system to manage their employee payrolls, all that. They are using some CRM application, either it can be Salesforce or it can be Dynamics, etc. Or they may be using some ERP application, either it can be SAP, something like ERP systems they may be using. So if you take any company or an organization, there are multiple applications which are useful to manage the business process within the company. Multiple applications are being used, right? Maybe some CRM applications we use, some ERP systems, some payroll management systems, maybe some BPM, business process management tools, something like Pega, Arapian and all, everything can be used in this. Okay, some maybe some core banking applications can be used by them. So these are the different applications. I can say these are the standalone, not from the sense of basic. Standalone means these are the individual applications. For example, if you take Salesforce as a CRM application, majorly focusing on the Salesforce CRM activity, whatever the activities are we performing, this is all something comes under the CRM part. But whereas when it comes to the usage perspective, when you try to understand or using a CRM application in the organization, normally CRM application will be accessed even by the front office people, even by the back office people can also be used this, or even finance team can use this, even HR team can also be using this. So what is that happening here? Access of data is more important. So when there is any application or a group of applications are there will be an interconnect, because let's say you are making some changes in core banking application which is existed already or you are developing. You have to identify how and where these application is connecting with other applications, because the kind of changes you have made in the particular application should not be impacted on the other areas. This you have to
Right.
make sure. Normally, in simple words, I can say when it comes to the application development, I'm not 100% relating, but to an extent possible to make it more easier, I'm giving example to you. In testing, there is a concept called regression testing. Hope you know that. Regression testing. Okay.
Right.
Right?
Yes, yes, I
Regression
know.
testing. What is regression testing?
So for us, regression testing is like a complete testing of different scenarios and figuring out under what circumstances, when what scenarios we are successful and what scenarios we are not successful.
To an extent, yes. Your said is true. Excellent. But end of the day, regression testing normally we do when there are any changes happens in the application.
Right.
Okay. Listening. When they are, for
Yes.
example, we are developing an application. Now, earlier the situations are different. Earlier, if you have taken requirements from the customer, you complete the application. But now the situation is not that, right? So customer requirements are changing very faster. Volatility in requirements will also be very higher. So what are we required nowadays to do? Whatever the application you have made so far or you have developed so far, either may not be 100%, but to an extent possible. If there is any possibility you want to make the changes, you have to make the changes in between. When you are making changes, what you have to ensure, this application should not be impacted on the other components. This should not be impacted on the other components. For that reason, what we do the regression testing. If you do the regression testing, what you come to know finally, being a tester, you will be knowing about is there any impacted areas or not, right? If it is impacted, what are all the areas were impacted and how to correct that?
Right.
Do you understand this, right?
Yes.
This, if I can go ahead and explain you from the architecture point of view, nowadays we are using, it is more technical. Whatever example I'm giving you, more technical, not from the architectural. This is all part of architecture only, but more technical oriented. Hope you might be knowing about an architecture called microservices now. We are using microservices architecture now. Earlier, it is not microservices. Akhil,
Yes.
you're listening.
Yes. Yes.
Microservices, right? So we are working on microservices now. Earlier, it was not. So why microservices? Because earlier, whatever the architecture are we using, the complete application development or the components what you are going to develop, you are developing for the whole application. For example, I'll give you an example to you. In the olden days, not now, in the very olden days, if you see, when there is any car is manufactured or any automobile car or a truck or something was manufactured in the beginning time, I'm not saying now. If there is any damage happened in any part of external part outside, right? So you have to change the complete set. Am I right?
Mhm.
Am I right or not? In the beginning time,
Right.
not now. In the olden days, if you see, if there is any vehicle got damaged in a particular area of a vehicle, normally the whole set right from the end to end, you have to change the complete setup. Am I right?
Right.
Why? Because earlier manufacturing is in a position, is in a state where the complete application, what are the components? Let us say, for example, components, either it can be a door, it can be a body, it can be a glass, it can be of anything. It is completely tightly coupled.
Right.
It is tightly coupled. Tightly coupled means if there is any damage happened for a particular one, automatically you have to change the entire portion of it, which is
Right.
an expensive affair, which is a critical thing for any person who has bought it. That was the situation earlier. Nowadays, for example, if there is any damage happened for a particular area, where that particular component can be replaced. Am I right?
Right.
Right. So that's how generally the system or manufacturing system has been designed. The same thing we are applying even for IT applications also nowadays. Earlier, the kind of implementation we do is in such a way, whatever the components are we using for a particular project or a feature, whatever the name you can call, everything were tightly coupled. If there are any changes you want to make in between, it is really difficult for us to make the changes. If you are making the changes, automatically it impacted on the other areas. Okay. So automatically what used to happen, application used to application used to get affected because of it. Even to troubleshoot that and make it in a right manner, it used to be taken lot of time, money for us. That was the situation in the beginning time. But now we are using microservices now. What is advantage in microservices architecture? This is part of architecture only. The reason I'm explaining this to you. Microservices architecture. What we are doing now, for every component, we are creating a separate microservices as separate for every component.
Right.
And if there is any kind of changes you want to make in the architecture, it is confined only to a particular component, so that you don't require to do the regression testing or the testing. You have to do it from the beginning. You cannot do it. You need not do it for the whole application at a time. So because the change you have made for a particular component, it is confined only to a particular component. Why? Because microservices is created for every component. Let's say there are 10 components you have, 10 microservices is created. 10 based on 10 microservices architecture, 10 components are implemented individually. And these are loosely coupled. Loosely coupled means if there is any changes you want to make, but in a particular component, you can do it at any point in time. So because now and then, volatility is more, right? So because due to the competition and the market needs, etc., there is a lot of volatility has been taken place. Lot of volatility is more. Due to the volatility, what is happening, if you want to make any kind of changes, an application should have that ease of changing in a very fast pace or very simple pace is what is needed. It shouldn't be more complex. If it is more complex, automatically effort will also increase. Complexity, technically, complexity will also be increased. Effort increase, cost will also be increased. Everything will be increased in this regard. This is where generally the microservices architecture came into existence. Nowadays, we are using. Earlier, it was not the case. Now we are using microservices. So these are all something comes under the metrics and measurements. Understood? Clear? Internally speaking, if you are connecting application architecture to business architecture, these metrics and measurements and all everything were connected to that regard. Understood to you? Clear, Akhil?
Got it. Got it.
Right. So this is where generally, now coming back to the application architecture. Application architecture is something which defines you what are the list of applications are we using and how these applications were interconnected. That's where generally we call it as application architecture stands for. Means let's say you're developing one application, you have to make sure in what way this application is interconnected. For example, you're working on some CRM application, right? So customer relationship management application. You want some customer data. From where you are accessing this customer data? You are accessing this customer data from local customer. For example, it's a retail operations, right? Retail company, a retail company like something like Walmart, etc. All that, right? So they are using some point of sale system to use for the billing purpose. Customer data is there. Now, if they want to use it in CRM application, what they have to do? They have to integrate that. They have to integrate this POS machine and inventory management system with CRM. So people who are working on CRM application can access the data. So for that, they have to create APIs, because to develop a communication between two different applications, what is required? You need to create an API for that. Am I right on that? API.
Right.
It can be a web API or it can be RESTful or SOAP API. Normally we creating an API so that we are developing a communication between two different applications. Communication, nothing but accessing of data, right? Accessing of data. Let's say you are booking a flight ticket, right? Nowadays we are going to the travel portal site, right? So you can, if you can provide the required details where you want to travel and how many people, all that. So they will give you all the information, right? So which are the flights are available and when it is available, time, everything will be mentioned over there. So being a user, what we do, right? So we normally we select the travel plan and all everything, and we book the tickets. So how how the access of data happened for the travel portal? This is where APIs comes into picture. Means if you are integrating with one application to another application, if you want to get the data, so because there are different methods like get method, put method, and all that. So using different methods and all, you can call the data. So this is where generally APIs and comes into picture. So when it comes to the application architecture, we must ensure and we have to see in such a way how these applications are working, in what way these applications were interconnected. This is what something which we call it as application architecture. This is point number 2. Point number 3, systems architecture. Systems architecture means how the systems were interconnected. How the systems were interconnected. That's what generally we call it as systems architecture stands for. Because what are the different systems do we have? And how are these systems are interconnected? This is what we call it as systems architecture stands for. System can be of anything. Okay. For example, we are using multiple workstations now. If you take any company or an organization, some applications were standalone applications on-premise, not standalone, on-premise. Some are cloud. So what is the difference here? For example, if you are working on some banking or healthcare companies or finance companies, etc., they always look a solution, something an on-premise one. They don't prefer cloud, 100%. They don't prefer cloud. Why? Because it's a finance. Data is all confined with finance, banking and all. Lot of data, financial data is there, which they wants to maintain the data in their local servers. That's the reason customer will always see, especially I'm talking about banking, finance, these domains, okay, not the other domains. These domain people, if you are providing a solution, they want some on-premise solution. They don't require cloud because cloud is easier. You know that because
Right.
cloud means you don't require to manage any infrastructure in your organization. Simply
Right.
you pay per use kind of, right? Simply you are paying what you are using for. And you
Right.
don't require to manage the data. Cloud service providers will look after that. Either it can be Google Cloud or it can be Azure or it can be AWS or IBM, right? So they will be looking after all that. So there were many other, but I'm just giving you the prominent ones, right? So this is how earlier. So cloud services are there. But nowadays, especially if you take financial institutions and all, normally they don't prefer cloud applications. For example, you want to develop some application as some XYZ application you are developing. They don't allow you to develop they don't want some cloud application all the time. Maybe they maybe for CRM or something of that sort, they may be using cloud applications, but core applications, core banking applications, core applications. I'm talking about core banking or core applications we are using. So they always want these applications must be an on-premise one. On-premise means the system has to be, this application has to be installed in their workstations, and
Right.
servers will also be located in their premises itself. There will be some firewall protection in order to restrict from any kind of malware attacks and all everything. This is all something. So when it comes to the systems architecture, which is so complex, because if you try to understand the organization from the systems point of view, if for example, if there are 100 systems they have, right? So 100 systems, some applications were on-premise, some applications were cloud. So you need to understand how this interconnectivity from on-premise to cloud and cloud to on-premise happened. That is where generally we call it a systems architecture.
Right.
Understood? Okay? Clear? Right?
Right.
Systems
Okay.
architecture. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just wondering, like, that's like, actually, I had also not thought about so many points that you're telling them. Is there a reading content that you can share, which I can read? Like, this session is good, or maybe if I can
1 minute, Akhil.
record the rest of the session.
Sorry, Akhil, can you repeat your question again?
Yeah, I said the way you're like the information you're telling me is like a very interesting one because even I hadn't thought it from so many perspectives. The way you're telling me, telling now. So I was just wondering if there's some reading content associated with it that you can share.
Material I'll prepare and I'll give you, Akhil, because as of now it is, because see, this is a regular recurrent practice I teach to the people.
Okay.
This is all a common practice to me.
Okay. Got it.
Honestly speaking, I don't have any material which was prepared so far. So I'll prepare. If you want, I'll give a material to you.
Or
Soft.
if can we record this session?
It is under recording. I'll share it to you if you want.
Okay.
You can take
Thank
it.
you. Sir. If it's recorded, very good.
Akhil, the
Thanks.
session is under recording. Every class will be recorded, Akhil. Okay.
Thank you.
And whatever the class is recorded, I'll give you, because normally, see, because the practical problem I'll tell you, this is not, see what happens sometimes, the kind of examples we will be taking, this is not something, which not planned earlier. There is nothing called planning. So as part of the regular flow, usually we give different examples and all. If you can ask me afterwards, after an hour, I'll forget. Usually.
Right.
Do you
No, it's
understand?
okay. Yeah, that's why I thought like let's record it so that
It is class under recording. Class is under recording. Yeah, I'll share you that recordings to you. No problem.
Okay, fine.
Every class I'll record it to you. Okay. This class recording will be shared to you so that you can just go through that. No problem. Because see, you need to understand about enterprise architecture, TOGAF and all. First, you need to understand the internal things.
Right. Yeah.
There are a lot of things are there, right? So business architecture you should understand, application should understand, data should understand, right? Systems architecture should understand, solution architecture you should understand. Okay, this is a frame. See, TOGAF is a framework to implement ADM principles, whatever the architectural development method principles to implement with. But if you want to implement this ADM principles from the TOGAF point of view, the base element of EA is always important for us to learn. That's the reason why these are all something which we are learning now.
Okay, got it.
You got my point clear, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Right. So let's continue. Right. So this is where generally systems architecture stands for. Systems architecture means what are the different systems are interconnected. Because some systems we are using for on-premise, some are cloud applications. Okay, on-premise means again, there are different firewall protections and all. So study over the systems architecture is also part of enterprise architecture. This is the third point. Last point, but not least, we call it as data architecture. As part of enterprise architecture is concerned, if you want to understand the enterprise, the organization as a whole, business architecture is important, aligned with values, principles, objectives, needs, scope, vision, mission, etc. Application architecture, what are the different applications they were using and how these interconnected. Systems architecture, what are the different workstations and systems and what type of applications they were using, either it can be on-premise or cloud. That's all comes under systems architecture. Last but not least, data architecture. Data architecture means how the flow of data happening, right? So from where generally the flow of data and how this data has to be flown from one system to another system. This is where generally, if you remember, there is a concept called data pipeline. Nowadays, it is becoming trending. It was there for a very long time. Now it is becoming more trending now because of the DevOps implementation. Because earlier there was no concept for DevOps. Nowadays, what we are doing, we are implementing DevOps, means development and operations. Both implementation and deployment will be on the same platform. So this time what we are doing, we are creating a data pipeline. Data pipeline means there shouldn't be any kind of impact of data which has to be flown from one system to another system. There shouldn't be any kind of destruction in between, interruption in between, not destruction, interruption in between. So data architecture majorly defines you how the data flow happens from one system to another system and how the flow of data must be created or must be generated in future, because you are introducing a new solution in between. So flow of the data, even the system will also be connected with other applications and workstations and all. The flow of the data must be in a streamlined such a way there shouldn't be any kind of interruption in between. So data architecture majorly focusing on that, because if you want to access some data, okay, or if you want to retrieve some data, or else if you want to analyze some data and all, right? So there are different tools are we using. For example, we want to uh, generate some reports and all, right? So now we are creating some query languages, something like SQL, everything we use. These query languages are something which will extract the information from the database and it will give you the results what you want. For example, you want to edit the data, or if you want to delete the data, update the data, right? So SQL is something which normally we use it. or else at the same time from data from the visualization perspective, there are different tools we are using like Power BI, Tableau and all. These are the tools which are part of business intelligence, where data visualization by creating some dashboard reports and all everything, we are using all these. At the same time, if you are analyzing the data, right? So there are different analysis tools and techniques, even systematic statistical tools are we using like R programming and all we are using. Especially when we are working on data analysis projects, one of the prominent programming language called Python we are using. This is all something comes under the back of it. So these are all the back end things. Okay, whatever I was explained you so far, these are all the back end things. But when you try to understand about enterprise architecture, it's always important for us to study about the data architecture also, because how the data flow from one system to another system, and
Right.
how should it behave and how should it flow, how it is flowing and how should it flow, that has to be understood. For that reason, it's always important for you to know about the data architecture. So combining four: business architecture, application architecture, systems architecture, data architecture. All these four is a combination of enterprise architecture.
Right. Okay. Got it.
Understood? Clear? Okay.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
This is what generally enterprise architecture. Again, I'm repeating, this is not TOGAF, this is enterprise architecture. We are talking about EA, enterprise architecture.
Right.
When you try to understand about enterprise architecture or any company, if you want to understand, you have to understand these four pillars. You need to understand the business angle, you need to understand the application angle, you need to understand the systems angle, you need to understand the data angle. Okay, now what is solution architecture then? Solution architecture means the kind of solution what a business analyst has given. Let's say a business analyst has given some business solution that has to be translated into a technical application. If you want to develop a technical application, what is required? It's always important for you to develop some technical application here. If you want to develop a technical application, it has to be implemented in a solution perspective. Solution, right? You need to give a solution for the application. But make sure the solution what you are going to provide, the kind of architecture you are going to provide, should have a flexibility in making some changes in that. I'll give you an example from the non-IT side, because even TOGAF we can implement even in the non-IT side also. I'll give you an example from the construction of a building. Now, if you see a construction of a building, right? So if, let's say that you have bought a piece of land wherein you are planning to construct a residential apartment. Now, if you want to construct a building, you require some manpower, you require some fund to construct that building. At the same time, you require some piece of land where you have already bought. Now, apart from all that, what else is required? We required a blueprint of the building. Am I right?
Right.
Okay. Right. Blueprint of the building is required. Now, again, blueprint of the building is categorized into different directions. Normally, you require a blueprint of the building for two different reasons. One, if you want to get permission from the local government authorities, planning people and all, right? So they have to give a permission for us to construct the building. So you need to submit a plan to them and their approval, then only you are eligible to, anyone has to eligible to construct a building. So for that, it is required. Second, even though how experienced people you have, unless until if they don't have any architecture or a blueprint or a building plan, they cannot do anything. Even though how experienced staff you have, they can't do anything unless until if there is no plan of action. So blueprint again will be categorized into different directions. Front end elevation of the blueprint of the building is important. Point number one. Second, we'll have internal plans. What are internal plan? We have a floor plan. Let's say they are constructing 5 floors. Each and every floor, we have a separate plan. Again, each and every floor, there are different flats. Let's say, for example, every floor contains 4 flats, which different dimensions. Each and every flat plan will be a separate. Now, next plans, electrical drawings, plumbing drawings. These are all required. So the best example for you to explain about the data flow is plumbing. because the kind of expenses which incurred for a constructed building over time happens is majorly where pump is it majorly comes with plumbing issue. Do you agree? Right? Plumbing issues. Major expenses is here in long run for any commercial or residential buildings. So as long as you are planning your plumbing design in such a way, this is where generally data flow comes into picture. Data flow, here is it is water flow. That's only the difference. Here is
Right.
the flow of water, here is it flow of data. That's only the difference. There shouldn't be any kind of interruption must be taken place in between. The kind of design whoever has given the plumbing design must be accurate in such a way. If there is any kind of, it's not only about flexibility. It should be tough. It should be flexible even. Why flexibility? If there is any changes in between you want to make, for example, business building design is given and all, we started working on it. You may be required to make some changes. For example, uh, loss of, let's say, for example, plumbing design. I'm just going away to the IT and I'm giving you some non-IT examples for you to make to understand very easy to you, Akhil. Okay, do remember, this is a disclaimer before. For example, plumbing design was given already. Okay, plumbing design already given by, plumbing design has been given by a plumber, where a plumbing people, wherein we have identified and we want to design the plumbing based on the pipelines and all everything we are creating. Now, here is a question you can ask me, right? Raj, if there is a plumbing design which was already designed, how come if there is any changes and all, what kind of changes happens in between, right? Is there any change? What could be the change? Now, let's say they didn't have any thought for that, but later on after coming months, they have identified that they want to put some water meters. They want to put some water meters because, for example, if someone has opened the tap in their washroom, uh, automatically, if nobody sees that, automatically what will happen? The overhead tank will be completely drained off. So there is a possibility sometimes, especially because of that, water wastage will be more. At the same time, loss of water, so that scarcity of water will come into picture. Now, the people have identified that why can't we put water meters for every floor or every flat, so that we will be knowing about how much water these people are consuming. Based on that, water bill will be generated for each and every flat. Combined, they will pay water bill finally. Okay, that is a different thing. But initially, whenever they have created a plumbing design, they don't have any idea of this. They don't have any idea, honestly speaking. Once they have started initiating, they came to know that, and they have identified why can't we do this? Because this is all something which has to be done in the beginning, not after. Because afterwards, it's an expensive thing, even in context to the flexibility of changing the pipelines and all. At the same time, even in the cost, in that at the context of investment also. Now they have to make some changes in the plumbing design. So when you talk about the architecture, plumbing design is an architecture. When you talk about, it must be strong, it must be tough. At the same time, it must be flexible in such a way. If there is any kind of changes we want to make in between, the changes should be flexible to us to make it easily. This
Right.
is where that generally the sole architectural skills are for any architect. If anybody we are working on, normally this major skill varies here. It's not only about the architecture they have developed, but that architecture should have a provision if there is any kind of changes required to do it in between. That flexibility is required. This is where generally solution architecture plays a vital and important role, because the kind of solution they have given, that solution whatever they have given may not be final. Maybe, for example, once we started working on the project, might be there are some new additional requirements or changes in requirements were taken place. Automatically, whatever the desired solution, the final solution you want to develop may have some deviation. Accordingly, your architecture should also be changed in such a way. So architecture should have a flexibility. This is where generally solution architecture comes into picture. Now, if you want to understand solution architecture, what is required, you must be able in a position to understand the non-functional requirements.
Right.
What is non-functional requirement? Non-functional requirement, nothing but functionality. Okay, functionalities anyway were there. Okay, for example, you are manufacturing a car. There is a feature called GPRS tracking device. If you want to use a GPRS tracking device, uh, there must be a provision for you to select the location where you are now. First of all, second, which location you want to reach. You must be having some OK button or submit button, so that whenever you are traveling, it will give you a voice message to you. Go straight, go left, go right, all that. When you reach the destination point, it will give you a voice message to you. You have reached the location, which is in the left and right hand side of yours. Now, here is a question I am asking you. For example, there was a location which is unknown to you. You are traveling. You have crossed the location. For after 5 minutes, you got the message. You got the voice message. Being a person who is driving the car, what is your first impression on this? What do you think first? Okay.
Sorry, can you come again?
My question is, you're driving a car.
Right.
There is a GPRS tracking device which was installed in the car.
Right.
Normally, once the destination point reaches, automatically you get a voice note, right? Before that.
Right.
But unfortunately, it didn't happen, right? After once you have crossed the destination point, it has given the voice message to you.
Right.
Now, being a person who is driving the car, what will be your impression?
So if the voice message didn't come before the destination and I've crossed the destination, it means that it didn't work properly. And now that I have to follow the new,
Accuracy.
routed route. Yes.
Accuracy, right? So you may have a doubt in context to the accuracy part. Am I right?
Right.
Yes or no? Accuracy. Accuracy. Because you feel that it is not so accurate. Because once you have crossed the destination point, you got the message. Because it's an unknown place to you, again, you have to come back. So accuracy is a 1 point. One more example. For example, you have bought a car, or you are planning to bought a car, and you bought a car, whatever that is, right? So there are required features, whatever is desired for you, whatever is needed, everything is there in that. But when you drive a car in context to the speed, I'm talking about the speed and as well as safety measures is concerned. When you drive the car, you came to know that, right? It is not the speed what we expect or what the features you actually have in the car. What do you feel? What was your opinion now, right? What was your opinion? You feel
So,
that car is not performing well. Am I right?
right.
It is not
Right.
so good. See, normally in context to performance, we calculate in context to the speed. In cars, I'm talking about automobile. Okay. Automobile performance, you calculate from the context of speed. Speed
Right.
is a performance. That's how generally we see. Of course, after that, safety, security, fuel efficiency. Okay. Whatever the kind of space they have given inside the car. So these are all we call it as non-functional requirements.
Right.
Understood?
Right. I agree.
Functional means what are the facilities was given in the car, that is functional, that is there. But when you will be satisfied, when the speed, whatever the speed you thought of, the speed, if you reach to that extent, safety, security, inside comfort level, at the same time accuracy, right? So accuracy of the maybe, for example, when we uh, put when we press the brake and all that, so that has to stop with a slow motion speed. So these are all comes under the accuracy part. So in the same manner, when you are going to develop a solution architecture majorly focusing on the non-functional side, not on the functional side. Because functional side, developers will take care of whatever the required coding to be written for a particular functionality, whatever the business logic we have to write, code I'm talking about, business logic, nothing but code to write, they will be taken care of. But what is needed here, it's not only about the business logic we are writing, it's always important for you and for us to learn about non-functional requirement part. Non-functional means performance, scalability, security, all that. So when there is any solution architecture we are going to develop, it's always important for us to understand the non-functional requirements as a primary area. Next, we should understand about two different systems. One is two different designs. One is high-level design, second is a low-level design. What is high-level design? Whatever the final solution you are going to develop, that's what we call it as high-level design stands for. Now, what is meant by low-level design here? Low-level design means if you want to develop the solution, listen carefully, right? If you want to develop the solution, how many programs you have to write? How many programs you have to write? How many lines of code you want to write, right? What kind of algorithm you want to develop, right? For example, if there is any kind of mistakes happens in code and all, what kind of design patterns we have to use? This is all comes under the low level design of the application. Do you understand this?
Right. I understand this. Yes.
For example, you are manufacturing a car, watch, right? A wristwatch. High level design means whatever the size of the watch, look, look or as well as ambience and all, and how the designs looks like. This is all high level design. Whatever the low level design depends on the size of the watch, depends on the weight of the watch, what kind of components they have used inside, and how macro or micro components they have used and all, and how it has to be placed. This is all comes under the low level design of the project.
Right.
Understood? Clear? Right?
Right.
So enterprise architecture doesn't require all this again, Akhil. Okay. Being an enterprise architect, we don't deal all that. Okay. Fortunately, we are not belongs to that category. But when it comes to the solution architecture, it was not the case. If you are that's the reason why, see, 100% I don't say, but maximum out of my experience, I can say enterprise architect, even though you are not strong in technology, I'm not saying you, anyone in general, I'm saying, even though a person is not technically 100% expertise, enterprise architect, he can become an enterprise architect. Either it can be TOGAF certified or something. But when it comes to the solution architect, it's not the case. If you are a solution architect, you must be a strong technical person, right? You must be having a strong knowledge over the coding part for sure. Then only you can become a solution architect. Otherwise, you are not allowed as an individual to become a solution architect successfully. Understand?
Okay, got it.
So this is the difference. One is enterprise architecture. These are all the elements are there. Second architecture called solution architecture. Solution architecture majorly focuses on the kind of solution you are going to develop, how simple, flexible the solution you are giving, how tough the solution must be, and at the same time, tough, at the same time, it must be flexible enough to make some changes if there is anything required. In future, you have to make the changes easily without having any complexity. This is where generally solution architecture is always important. So enterprise architects are understand with these four elements. But when it comes to the solution architects is concerned, solution architects majorly focusing on the solution point of view by understanding the non-functional requirements, by understanding the high-level design, by understanding the low-level design, etc.
Okay.
Clear, Akhil? Understood?
Okay.
This
Right.
is the overall scenario. For today, I'm just taken that you can take this as an introduction also, right? So this is how usually this TOGAF kind of, right? So this enterprise architecture. So all these things comes into picture. And
Okay.
tomorrow I'm going to start with TOGAF part, right? So what TOGAF frameworks, right? So what are the basic core concepts of TOGAF, right? So discussing about what are the different methods do we have, right? So discussing about architectural development methods as well as the principles of architecture guidelines, followed by architectural governance, right? So these parts I'm going to discuss from tomorrow onwards, as usual.
Okay.
Clear, Akhil? Any questions? Please go ahead.
No, I'm fine. I like just if do you have any like what is a recommended book that you say that let's follow this book so that I can also read in bit in advance. I can also
For
ask questions.
certification, you're talking about.
For certification, yes.
I think with the books which you have shown me, these are pretty enough. I think 10 version is there already. You have shown me that book. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that what I downloaded from this org, open.org, is a
Uh,
evaluation copy. It says Open Standard Group, the TOGAF Standard Architecture Development Method,
hmm.
and it's an evaluation copy. Is it
ADM
okay?
principles are common. See, architectural development method principles are common even for 9, 1.1, and 10. So there is
Okay.
no difference. Okay, if there is any kind of changes and all, there may be some slight variations in context to the improvement is concerned. Otherwise, everything is fine. No
Okay.
changes.
Okay, fine.
Because see, it's always because anyway you have downloaded from Open Group Framework, it's always accurate, right? So there is no comparison, nothing, right? It's
Okay.
it's perfect because if you're following that guide, that itself is enough. Because anyway, when you are applying for certification and writing,
Mhm.
you have to follow the same guidelines. Better you follow the same material and just listen my recordings to make it work very simple. Because
Okay.
I'll try to make it as simple as I can. So
Mhm.
because scenario based learning is important when you are going for TOGAF. Because
Mhm.
scenario based questions we come across where we have to answer scenario based learning, because understanding the scenario and giving a right answer for that, right, that is important, especially for
Okay.
architectural related stuff. So
Mhm.
anyway, you can just listen my recordings and you can follow the material which you have already taken, which you have already downloaded, and you can use it, no problem.
Okay. And you're based out of Hyderabad, right?
Yes, yes.
Fine. And fine. Like anyway, I'm